The night on planet Rho 7 was unlike any other. A cold wind howled through the alien wasteland, where towering black spires twisted toward the sky. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of decay. The Dracor, terrifying creatures with scales and sharp claws, had ruled the planet for centuries. They believed they were invincible, that no species could challenge their power. But that was about to change. Deep in the shadows of the Dracor fortress, a group of humans stood, ready to make history. The human special forces, elite soldiers trained for the most dangerous missions, had arrived on the planet. Their mission was simple but deadly: destroy the Dracor and shut down their deadly portal weapon. The Dracor had been using this portal to invade other worlds, and humanity was the last line of defense. But they had no idea that these humans were different. Led by Commander Jace Ryland, the team moved like shadows in the dark. They were silent, swift, and deadly. The Dracor had no idea what was coming for them. The soldiers' uniforms blended perfectly with the night, and their weapons were ready for action. There was no turning back now. The mission had to succeed, or humanity would be lost. "Move out," Jace whispered, his voice calm but commanding. He checked his weapon, a pulse rifle, and nodded to his team. They were all experienced, all ready. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. The group crept through the underground tunnels of the fortress, avoiding detection. They could hear the demonic growls of the Dracor above, but they stayed silent, every step calculated. The walls around them were covered in strange alien symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. The air was heavy, and the pressure in the tunnels made every breath feel harder. But they pushed forward. They knew what was at stake. As they reached the inner chambers of the fortress, Jace held up a fist, signaling for everyone to stop. Ahead of them, through a large metal door, was the heart of the Dracor operation. It was there, in that chamber, that the portal lay, powered by a source of energy unlike anything humans had ever seen. Jace looked at his team. "We've trained for this moment. This is a mission. We can't fail." The soldiers nodded, their faces set with determination. They were ready. Jace signaled, and the team burst into the chamber. The door smashed open with a loud bang. The Dracor inside the room froze, staring in shock as humans. Their worst nightmare stood before them. But there was no hesitation. Jace was the first to strike, his rifle flashing as he fired. The pulse shot hit a Dracor warrior square in the chest, sending it flying backward. The sound of the explosion echoed in the chamber, but the humans were already moving, swift and silent. Another Dracor soldier lunged toward a team member, but he was knocked to the ground in a flash. The soldier didn't hesitate. He moved like lightning, taking down the alien with a sharp blade, clean and fast. There was no room for mercy here. "Stay focused," Jace shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. They were outnumbered, but the humans fought with a speed and ferocity the Dracor had never seen before. But then, the unthinkable happened. A huge Dracor warrior, much larger than the others, stepped forward from the shadows. His body was covered in thick, spiked armor, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural, fiery red light. This was Vrako, the Dracor general. He looked at the humans with disdain. "You think you can defeat us?" His voice was low and guttural, full of rage. Jace stood tall, never flinching. He had heard the stories about Vrako, how he had destroyed entire civilizations with his bare hands. But Jace was not afraid. "No," Jace said, his voice calm. "We know we can." With a roar, Vrako charged, swinging his massive claws. But Jace was faster. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. His pulse rifle was already in his hands, firing shot after shot. Each hit seemed to do nothing but anger the general more. But Jace didn't need to kill Vrako. His mission was clear: destroy the portal. The rest of the team moved quickly. They set explosives around the chamber, each one carefully placed to destroy the portal without causing the entire fortress to collapse. But the Dracor weren't done yet. More of them poured into the room, surrounding the humans. The fight was growing more intense by the second. Jace glanced at the timer on his wrist. They had only minutes before the portal was fully charged, ready to unleash chaos on Earth. They couldn't afford to fail. Vrako swung again, and this time, Jace wasn't fast enough. The blow struck his shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. The pain was sharp, But Jace didn't scream. He pushed himself up, gritting his teeth. "Keep going!" Jace shouted to his team. "We finish this now." Just as the Dracor closed in, the explosives went off with a deafening boom. The portal crackled and shook, and the whole chamber seemed to rumble with the force of the explosion. The portal was shut down. Jace and his team barely made it out as the walls of the fortress crumbled behind them. As they escaped into the darkness, Jace looked back one last time. The Dracor had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The explosion had barely faded when the team emerged from the ruins of the Dracor fortress, panting, covered in sweat, and stained with blood. But there was no time to rest. The mission wasn't over. The portal was destroyed, but there was a far greater enemy looming over them now. The Dracor general, Vraco, was still alive, and he was furious. Jace Rylan, though injured from the fight, stood tall, his eyes scanning the horizon. The air on planet Row 7 was thick with tension. The faint rumble of distant footsteps echoed as the ground beneath them vibrated. The general's forces were regrouping. "We've just made them angry," Jace muttered under his breath. His team looked at him, knowing what that meant. There would be no mercy. Vraco would stop at nothing to destroy them. But Jace wasn't worried about that. He had fought in battles before, and he had faced worse odds. What scared him more was something deeper. The fear he saw in the eyes of the soldiers as they faced the Dracor. It wasn't just fear of death. No, it was something worse. Something humanity hadn't faced before. It was fear of the unknown. Before they could even move, the air shifted. A strange hum vibrated through the ground. Jace's heart sank. "They are coming," he said softly. The human soldiers quickly fell into formation, their weapons at the ready. There was a sudden movement in the distance, like shadows moving in the smoke. Out of the haze, massive creatures began to appear. They weren't just Dracor soldiers. They were night stalkers, demon beasts so powerful they were only used in the worst battles. The kind of weapons that even the general rarely called upon. And now, they were after the humans. Jace raised his hand to signal the team. They crouched low, hiding behind the shattered remains of alien buildings. The soldiers' hearts raced. They could feel the ground tremble as the night stalkers drew closer. These beasts weren't like anything they'd seen before. They were fast, vicious, and relentless. One of the soldiers, Private Marcus Hale, a young man barely 20, gripped his rifle tightly. He had always been good under pressure, but the sight of the monstrous creatures approaching made his hands shake. "Stay calm, Marcus," Jace whispered, sensing the tension. "We're not done yet. We fight like we always do. Together." Marcus nodded, but his fear was clear. These were not just enemies. These creatures were nightmares brought to life. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed across the battlefield, and the night stalkers rushed forward, their eyes glowing with hunger. They were like wolves, except far larger, and with claws that could shred through metal. Jace didn't wait for them to come closer. He fired first, his pulse rifle sending a burst of energy straight into the chest of one of the beasts. It staggered back, howling in pain, but then the others came forward with even greater speed. The soldiers fired in unison, but the night stalkers were too fast, too savage. They jumped from one side of the battlefield to the other, striking from unexpected angles. There was no way to know where they would appear next. "Keep moving," Jace shouted. He didn't wait for the team to respond. They were fighting for their lives, and the enemy wasn't going to wait. As the soldiers fought with everything they had, Jace noticed something terrifying. The Night Stalkers weren't just attacking out of instinct. There was something intelligent about them. Something coordinated. Then Jace realized a horrible truth. The Dracor had been training these monsters, making them even more deadly. They were no longer just animals. They were weapons. Jace had to think fast. He spotted a narrow passageway that led into the ruins of a Dracor stronghold, a place that had been untouched by the explosion. It might be a trap, but it was their only chance. "Fall back!" Jace yelled. "We're moving into the ruins." The team quickly retreated, firing cover shots as the Night Stalkers relentlessly pursued. The sound of claws scraping against stone echoed behind them. Inside the ruins, the humans stopped for a brief moment to catch their breath. Their plan had worked, for now, but they knew this wouldn't last. Jace wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart still pounding. The Dracor general had not only sent his best warriors after them, but he had also shown them something far worse. The Dracor were ready for anything. They were learning, and the special forces were starting to realize just how dangerous this mission had become. "We can't stop here," Jay said, looking over his soldiers. "We fight for Earth. We fight for each other. And we will win, no matter what it takes." But deep down, Jace knew, the fight ahead wouldn't just be a battle of strength or strategy. It would be a fight to prove that humanity could survive against all odds. The real war had only just begun. The ruins of the Dracor stronghold felt alive with an eerie stillness. The dust from the explosion still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jace Ryland and his team crouched behind broken stone walls, their breath heavy and their bodies exhausted. The Night Stalkers had pushed them to their limit, but now they had new problems to deal with. They were deep inside enemy territory, and the worst was yet to come. The mission was clear: destroy the Dracor's remaining war machines, shut down their defenses, and make sure the portal weapon could never be activated again. But time was running out. If they didn't act fast, the Dracor would launch a counteroffensive that would crush humanity's defenses. Jace wiped the blood from his brow, his shoulder still aching from the blow he'd taken from Vraco. His team was tired, their weapons running low on ammunition, but they couldn't stop now. The survival of Earth depended on them. "We move out in 5, Jay said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. He checked his timepiece and noted that the mission clock was ticking. They had less than 2 hours before the Dracor launched a full-scale assault. There was no more time to waste. "We destroy the weapons. We win this war." His words echoed in the silent ruins, and for a moment, the soldiers exchanged glances, part determination, part fear. Myra Hale, the youngest member of the team, spoke up. Her voice was soft but firm. "We can't afford to fail, sir. But what if we don't make it out in time?" Jace turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "We will. And we'll make sure every Dracor that stands in our way regrets crossing us." But deep down, Jace knew that failure was not an option. If they failed, Earth would fall, and humanity would be wiped from the stars forever. That weight pressed down on him like a boulder, but he couldn't let his team see that. They needed hope, not doubt. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble. It was subtle at first, but then it grew stronger, as if the Earth itself was warning them. A low hum filled the air, followed by a sound unlike anything they'd heard before, a mechanical roar. Jace quickly raised his hand. "Stay low. They're moving in." The sound grew louder, and soon the source was clear. A Dracor war machine, a massive mechanized tank, rolled into view. Its spiked wheels crushed the stone beneath it as it moved, its massive cannons aiming directly at the soldiers. The tank's sheer size was enough to crush everything in its path. The Black Thunder, as the Dracor called it, was a weapon designed for total annihilation. Its plasma cannons could burn through anything, leaving nothing behind, and it was heading straight for them. Jace's eyes narrowed. "We can't outrun it." They didn't have time to think. The Black Thunder's massive cannons charged, the air crackling with electricity. Myra looked up at Jace, eyes wide. "What do we do?" "We fight," Jace replied, his voice calm, but there was a fire burning behind his eyes. "We take it down." The team sprang into action. They split into 2 groups. One would distract the tank, while the other would make their way to its vulnerable side. They had to disable the weapon's power core before it could fire. Jace's team had taken down enemies before, but this was something else entirely. Marcus Hale, his rifle in hand, looked at Jace. "We can't let them win, sir. If we stop this thing, we win." Jace nodded. "Exactly. Now, move." The team split, moving with deadly precision. Jace and Captain Laura Trent led the charge toward the tank's weak side, dodging plasma fire as the Black Thunder fired its massive cannons. The ground exploded around them as they sprinted, jumping behind cover whenever they could. The blast shook the ruins, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Almost there. Jace gritted his teeth, his eyes locked on the massive power core exposed on the side of the war machine. They were so close, but the plasma shots were getting more accurate. "Cover me, Laura!" Jace yelled as he dove toward the tank side. Lara fired her weapon, keeping the Dracor soldiers distracted as Jace sprinted to the exposed core. With blazing speed, Jace reached the core. He had made seconds before the tank could fire again. Sweat dripped down his face as he pulled out a small device from his belt, the same device used to disable enemy technology. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. As he connected the device to the core, the tank's cannons began to glow brighter, charging for another devastating shot. "Hurry, Jace!" Lara screamed from behind, but he didn't answer. He had to focus. The device clicked into place, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. The tank's roar grew louder, and Jace felt the pressure building in his chest. If this failed, they were all dead. Then, there was a click. The device activated. The power core sparked. Then, silence. The Black Thunder suddenly shut down, its cannons no longer charging. The immense machine was now lifeless, a hunk of useless metal. Jace exhaled in relief, but he knew it was far from over. "It's done, Jace!" Lara called out, her voice filled with disbelief. "We did it!" But Jace wasn't celebrating. This was just one battle. The war was far from over. The Dracor would send more weapons, more monsters, and they'd have to keep fighting, no matter what. "Get ready, team. We've got more to do." Jace turned, his eyes locked on the horizon. "And we will win." The victory over the Black Thunder was only temporary relief. The team knew the Dracor wouldn't stop, and neither could they. After disabling the war machine, Jace Ryland and his soldiers pressed forward into the heart of the Dracor's stronghold. Their objective had not changed: destroy the last remaining war factories and prevent the Dracor from launching another full-scale invasion of Earth. But as they moved deeper into enemy territory, something was different. The atmosphere in the ruins was thick with tension. The soldiers felt it. Something was off, even though they couldn't put their fingers on it. They were no longer just fighting aliens. They were fighting for something far bigger: survival. But as each passing hour wore on, the lines between right and wrong began to blur. They were no longer just soldiers. They were instruments of war, and that came with a price. The deeper they ventured into the fortress, the more dangerous their mission became. Every corner could hide another Dracor trap, another monster or war machine. But the most dangerous thing of all was what they didn't know about their own team. The tension came to a head in the dilapidated chamber, where Jace called for a moment of rest. The team had been on their feet for hours, constantly on the move, under attack, and taking down enemy after enemy. The walls of the chamber were adorned with Dracor symbols, and the flickering lights cast long, jagged shadows across the room. The soldiers gathered around a small table where their maps and data readouts were laid out. Jace leaned forward, scanning the screen. "We're close," he said. "The main war factory is just ahead. We'll hit it hard and fast." There was a brief pause before Captain Lara Trent spoke up. Her voice was softer than usual. "Are we sure we're doing the right thing here? How many more lives are we going to take to stop them?" Jace turned toward her. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't get angry. It wasn't the first time someone had questioned the mission. In fact, he'd heard it from his team before. They were all struggling with the weight of what they were doing. But Lara's question felt different. There was a hesitation in her voice, something he hadn't expected from his most trusted officer. "This isn't about us, Lara. This is about Earth. If we don't stop them now, there won't be a planet left to save," Jay said, his voice firm. He had to stay focused. He couldn't let doubt creep in. But the silence that followed spoke volumes. Even the other soldiers looked uneasy. They had all seen things on this mission that no one should ever have to witness. The price of victory was becoming more and more apparent. Suddenly, Private Marcus Hale, the young soldier who had looked up to Jace as a mentor, shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, we've been through a lot together, but I have to ask, how much further can we push this? We've lost too many already." Jace opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a soft click echoed in the chamber. The team froze. It was the sound of a weapon being primed, a sound only soldiers knew too well. Jace's instincts kicked in. He grabbed for his pulse rifle, but before he could act, Lara stepped forward. Her eyes locked on Jace with a coldness that made his heart skip a beat. "It's over, Jace." Lara's voice was steady, yet filled with a sharp edge. What are you talking about? Jace demanded, his hand still gripping his weapon. We're still in the fight. We can't stop now. Lara didn't flinch. I'm sorry, Jace, but we're not winning this war. Not like this. She took a step back, and with a quick motion, she pulled out a communication device. Lara. Jace's voice shook with disbelief. What the hell are you doing? The device hummed as Lara spoke into it. This is Captain Lara Trent. The mission is compromised. We can't continue. We need extraction. A wave of shock hit Jace like a punch to the gut. Captain Lara Trent, the leader of his second-in-command, had just betrayed them. She was working with the Dracor. The realization crushed him. You've been with them all along, haven't you? Jace's voice broke. He couldn't believe it. The person he trusted most had been playing them all this time. Lara turned away, her eyes cold and hard. I did what I had to do. You don't understand, Jace. You never did. Humanity is not worth saving. The Draco offered me power, a chance to be something more. And I took it. Jace's mind raced. He couldn't fathom what was happening. Lara, a trusted leader, had been a traitor all along. Lara, you're making a mistake. Jace said, stepping closer, hoping she'd change her mind. We can still stop them. We can still save Earth. Lara's lips curled into a smile, but it was a cruel smile. It's too late for that, Jace. I've already made my choice. Before anyone could react, Lara activated a hidden device in her hand, sending a signal to the Dracor. The enemy reinforcements would be here soon. She had betrayed them. The team was in shock. They couldn't move. The battlefield had changed. Get ready for what's coming, Jace, Lara said with a twisted grin. This war is over for you. The sound of alien engines revved in the distance, growing closer. The team had just been betrayed by one of their own, and now they were facing the consequences of trusting the wrong person. The air in the Dracor's stronghold was thick with tension, the betrayal of Captain Lara Trent still weighing heavily on the remaining soldiers. The team had been shattered, both mentally and emotionally. They were no longer just facing an alien invasion. They were now fighting against their own. Jace Ryland stood at the center of the room, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had trusted Lara. She had been the steady leader, the one who always had a plan, the one who always knew what to do. But now, she was gone, and they were left to pick up the pieces of a broken mission. What now, Commander? Marcus Hale's voice broke the silence, his face filled with doubt. The youngest member of the team, Marcus had been looking up to Jace as a mentor. But now, his eyes were filled with uncertainty. Jace looked at his soldiers. They had been through so much already. Too much. And yet, here they were, on the brink of victory or utter destruction. He knew one thing for certain. They couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything they'd sacrificed. We finished the mission, Jace said, his voice calm but firm. The soldiers looked at him, their faces mixed with disbelief and exhaustion. But they also saw something in Jace's eyes that reminded them why they were still standing. He believed in them, and that belief gave them hope. We don't have a choice, Jace continued. Lara's betrayal is a setback, but it doesn't change the fact that the Dracor have to be stopped. This war isn't over. Not until we win. There was a brief pause before Myra Hale, Marcus's older sister, spoke up. She was a quiet one, the one who had always kept her emotions in check. But now, her voice shook with a mix of rage and disbelief. Jace, how can we keep going? She was one of us. She betrayed us. Everything we've been fighting for feels like a lie. I know, Myra, Jace said softly, his voice filled with a rare vulnerability. I know how you feel. I trusted her too. But we can't let her decision control us. We fight because Earth needs us. And we fight for each other. That's all we've got left. Myra nodded slowly, but the anger in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't ready to forgive Lara. None of them were. But Jace was right. The war wasn't over. Suddenly, the sound of a low hum echoed through the chamber, followed by the distant rumble of engines. The ground beneath them trembled, and the team's weapons were at the ready in an instant. The Dracor were here, and they weren't going to wait. Prepare for battle. Team, we've got one shot at this, Jay said, his voice filled with the weight of their responsibility. He was ready, but he knew this mission would take everything they had left. This time, they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for humanity's last chance. As they moved out, a sense of urgency gripped the soldiers. The time for doubt was over. The mission was the only thing that mattered. They had to take down the last of the Dracul war machines and disable the remaining power cores before it was too late. Jace led the way, his rifle in hand. They moved through the desolate halls of the Dracul's stronghold, their footsteps echoing through the empty space. The walls were covered in alien symbols, glowing faintly as if mocking their progress. The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and charred flesh, remnants of the earlier battles. As they reached the central command room, the team paused, their eyes scanning the darkened space. They could feel it, the presence of the Dracul elite forces. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation. Without warning, the door crashed open, and the sound of alien roars filled the room. The Dracul had been waiting for them, and they were more prepared than ever. The soldiers were surrounded, their exit cut off by massive Dracul war beasts. Jace's heart raced as he scanned the battlefield. The odds were impossible, but they had no choice now. This was the final stand. "Take cover!" Jace shouted, as the team dug behind metal pillars and broken walls. The battle had begun. The Dracul war beasts charged, their claws slicing through the air. The team fired back with precision, but the beasts were too fast, too strong. Every shot that hit them seemed to only slow them down. The soldiers were outnumbered, and their weapons were growing less effective with each passing second. But Jace didn't give up. He knew that the key to winning this battle was the core. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the Dracul's war efforts. "Myra, Marcus," Jace called. "We need to get to the core. Now." The two siblings nodded, moving with incredible speed and agility. The rest of the team continued to hold off the Dracul, buying them the time they needed. With every step closer to the core, the pressure mounted. The soldiers were fighting on empty of hope, empty of strength, but never empty of determination. And then they reached it. The power core, hidden deep in the heart of the stronghold, glowed brightly, its energy pulsed steady and powerful. But the Dracul were close. Too close. Jace looked at his team one last time. "This is it. We shut it down, and we win." As Myra and Marcus set the explosives, the Dracul elite broke through their defenses. The final battle was now a matter of seconds. Seconds that would determine humanity's fate. The hum of the Dracul core echoed through the dark, alien stronghold, its glow casting an eerie, green light on everything around them. Time was slipping through their fingers, and Jace Ryland knew that they had just moments left before the Dracul brought their final wave of destruction down upon them. The team was bruised, battered, and running on nothing but sheer willpower. They had fought through the night, faced betrayal, and witnessed horrors beyond imagination. But the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. "Myra, Marcus, are the charges set?" Jace asked, his voice low but full of urgency. The words felt like a heavy weight in his chest. "Almost." Myra answered, her hand shaking as she placed the last of the explosives around the core. She wasn't just afraid of failing. She was afraid of what would happen if they didn't stop the Dracul right now. In the distance, the sound of alien engines grew louder. The Dracul had reinforcements on the way, the last of their war machines, fully armed and ready to crush them. Jace's mind raced. The explosives had to work. They had to destroy the core and shut down the Dracul's weapon systems. If they failed, the Dracul would activate the final weapon, a massive device capable of wiping out entire cities with a single blast. And Earth, humanity's last hope, would be lost forever. But there was something else, something even more terrifying. As Jace looked at his team, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if the Dracul had already anticipated this? What if they knew the humans would come for the core? A sudden voice over the comms snapped him from his thoughts. "Commander Ryland." The voice crackled. It was familiar, but cold. It was Lara. Jace's blood ran cold. She had betrayed them, but now she was contacting him. His heart beat faster. "Lara," Jace growled. "What do you want?" Her laughter echoed in his ears, a bitter, mocking sound. "Oh, Jace, you think you're winning? You've been playing into our hands all along." You've already lost. Jace's pulse quickened. Was it a trap? What was she planning? Lara's voice softened, almost as if she were enjoying his confusion. The core is a decoy. You're too late. Commander, the real weapon is already charging. You're standing on the edge of your own destruction. Jace's thoughts raced, his instinct screaming that he needed to act fast. The real weapon? How could that be? Had the Draco already set it in motion? Had they misunderstood the situation? Were they running out of time? Lara's voice turned to a whisper. Goodbye, Jace. Before Jace could respond, the comms went silent. A deep dread settled in his gut. They had to destroy the core, but Lara's words now haunted him. Jace, we need to go. Myra shouted, pulling his attention back to the task at hand. The team had finished setting the charges, but they had less than a minute before the entire place would explode. Jace clenched his fists, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. He turned toward his team, who were already bracing for the explosion. The sound of the Draco reinforcements getting closer was deafening. Move! Now! Jace barked. He knew they had no time to waste. The explosives were their only chance, but would they be enough? As they sprinted down the narrow corridors of the stronghold, the walls seemed to close in around them. The ground shook with every blast from the Draco's war machines, their steps growing louder with each passing second. But the team didn't stop. They pushed forward, even as their bodies screamed for rest. Finally, they reached the entrance, the final escape route. But the view before them stopped them cold. The sky above was burning. The Draco fleet had arrived. Massive Draco ships filled the sky, their black silhouettes blocking out the sun. They were too many, far too many. Jace felt the air grow heavy with hopelessness. They had already lost so much. Was this the end? We don't stop, Jace said, his voice low but unwavering. We finish this. We do this for Earth. For humanity. The team looked at him, their faces filled with fear and determination. They knew what it meant now. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future. They were fighting for every person on Earth. As Jace signaled the team to move, a massive explosion suddenly rocked the ground beneath them. The core had detonated. The stronghold trembled, and the Draco war machines faltered. For a moment, everything went still. The team stood, staring at the destruction they had caused. But that stillness didn't last long. The Draco fleet was advancing. With one final push, Jace's team sprinted toward their extraction point. The only thing left was to fight until they couldn't anymore. The air was thick with smoke and fire. The massive Draco fleet filled the sky, their ships dark and ominous as they descended upon Earth, preparing for their final assault. Below, the wreckage of the Draco's stronghold smoldered, the last remnants of their military might crumbling to dust. Jace Ryland's team was battered, bruised, and broken. But they had one chance left, and they would not fail. As they ran through the blasted ruins, the ground beneath them shaking with the force of the explosions, Marcus Hale stumbled, his leg caught by a jagged piece of metal. Myra, his older sister, reached for him, but he waved her off. I'm good, Marcus said, his voice gritted through the pain. He pushed himself up, refusing to let the team down. But Jace could see the toll the battle had taken. Their bodies were exhausted. Their spirits were shattered. They had lost too much. And yet, here they were, the last line of defense. We finished this, Jace said, his voice low but filled with fire. The Draco think they've won, but we're about to show them what humanity is made of. The team moved toward the final battle, but the path ahead was far from simple. Every step was met with a roar of alien engines, the rapid footsteps of Draco soldiers, and the relentless pounding of war machines. The final battle would not be a sprint, it would be a last stand. As they neared the edge of the stronghold, they could see the Draco preparing to unleash their final weapon. A colossal cannon, mounted on one of the Draco flagship cruisers, was primed and ready to fire. This weapon was unlike any they had faced. It was designed to destroy entire cities with one shot. If they didn't stop it now, the world would burn. There's our target, Jay said, his voice cold with resolve. That cannon must go down. But as they approached, they saw something that made their blood run cold. The final weapon was protected by a shield, a barrier of energy that would take everything they had to breach. We can't go through it, Marcus said, panting. Jace's mind raced. There had to be a way to take it down. His eyes scanned the area, and then he saw it, a weak point in the shield, just under cannon. It was small, almost invisible. But it was there. Myra, Marcus, cover me, Jace said, his voice unwavering. I'm going in. Without waiting for a response, Jace sprinted toward the cannon, weaving through the fire and chaos. His heart pounded in his chest, each step bringing him closer to his target, and closer to the end. The shield crackled around him, a storm of energy that pushed back against his every move. But Jace refused to stop. He couldn't. Earth's survival depended on him reaching the weak point. Behind him, the rest of the team opened fire, keeping the Dracor forces at bay. Myra, her gun blazing, moved with precision, taking down alien soldiers one by one. Marcus, despite his injuries, fought fiercely by her side, his eyes never leaving his commander. Jace reached the weak point. His fingers fumbled with a device strapped to his wrist, a last-minute idea he'd pulled together in the heat of the moment. He attached it to the shield's core and pressed a button. There was a sudden flash of light. The shield flared, then collapsed. The final weapon was now exposed. Jace didn't hesitate. He activated the explosive charge on the cannon and dove for cover. The explosion shook the ground, sending a shockwave through the stronghold. For a moment, there was silence. The Dracor fleet stopped. The air felt still. And then, the sky exploded. The Dracor warships above faltered, their engines sputtering and shutting down. The massive cannon, now destroyed, sent a shockwave through the fleet, knocking out their systems. The Dracor were crippled. It's over, Jace, Myra said, her voice filled with disbelief as she stared up at the sky. But Jace's eyes were on the ground. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. They had won, but at what cost? Around him, the soldiers were catching their breath, some still fighting, some staring at the devastation that had been wrought. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The Dracor would regroup, and the fight for Earth would continue. But humanity had proven something that day. They had proven that they could survive. And more than that, they could fight back. As the dust settled, Jace stood tall. The sky above was filled with the wreckage of the Dracor ships, their threat now nothing more than a fading memory. The world was still standing, and humanity still had a future. But one thing was clear, the fight was far from over. This was only the beginning. We keep fighting, Jace whispered to himself, because this was humanity's dawn.